Herman Cain believes there isn't much of a race problem in this country, and of course Republicans love to have a black guy saying that. So here he is on television telling us all about why it's not a problem.
I have achieved all of my American dreams and then some because of the great nation, the United States of America. What's there to be angry about?
I would say to you, an unemployment rate for blacks that is far higher, almost 6% higher, 7% higher than for whites.
Yes.
A percentage of black incarceration in the nation's prison systems
Yes.
that is far greater. I would tell you that minorities, especially African Americans, can name a lot of things that speak to a certain amount of racism that they can still complain about. And so I wonder if you are taking your good fortune and superimposing it over everyone else when it doesn't really apply.
Luck is when preparation meets opportunity. That's what I've done all my career. Secondly, I don't believe racism in this country today holds anybody back in a big way. Are there some elements of racism? Yes. It gets back to, if we don't grow this economy, there is a ripple effect for every economic level, and because blacks are more disproportionately unemployed, they get hit the worst when economic policies don't work.
All right, so let's break that down. First of all, I didn't like Candy Crowley's reference to aren't there legitimate things to complain about? It's not a matter of just complaining, it's a matter of reality. So what's the reality that Herman Cain is ignoring? For example, when so famous study of when they sent the same exact resumes with black names as opposed to traditionally black names, as opposed to traditionally white names, the traditionally white names got callbacks 50% more. It's the same exact resume. See, now that isn't just something you complain about, it's something that is a structural problem, that it doesn't just affect poor people, it specifically affects black people. And the reason that it does that is because of, it might be subconscious racism we don't even recognize. So it makes it harder for them to get a job. So that's part of the reason why they are unemployed more. Now Herman Cain looks at that and goes, oh, well, that's your problem, you just gotta work harder. Now look, the thing is, you do have to work harder. It doesn't mean that you see that and you go, okay, well then I can't get a job. You can, but it's harder for you. We have to recognize that and try to figure out a way beyond it, not just by saying, well, Herman Cain got successful, well, so then nobody else has a right to so-called complain. By the way, there's endless amount of studies. They did a study on eBay, white hand and a black hand trying to sell the same exact equipment, right, or product. And the black hand gets a lower price and has a hard time selling it. But it's the same exact product. See, that's what I'm talking about. Subconscious racism, we don't even realize exists so much. David Sirota pointed out an excellent example of it in the Major League Baseball. Turns out the same race calls more strikes, so umpires do, for their own race. Now that's true for black umpires with black pitchers, but mainly there are more white umpires than black umpires. So it turns out that white pitchers have a huge advantage in baseball because they get more strike calls and less ball calls. Now that's enormous, right? These are all the things that are real, but that Herman Cain minimizes and helps Republicans in their own mind go, oh, well, if a black guy minimized it, it must not be anything. And Herman Cain, he gets along great with executives, so things must be fine, which is exactly what he says next.
We are all entitled to an opportunity to be able to go after our definition of the American dream. Everybody's definition of the American dream is different. You owe the opportunity for a level playing field.
And do blacks have a level playing field right now with whites?
Many of them do. Many of them do have a level playing field. I absolutely believe that, because not only because of the businesses that I have run, which has had a combination of whites, blacks, Hispanics, you know, we had a total diversity, but also because of the corporations whose board I've served on for the last 20 years. I have seen blacks in middle management move up to top management in some of the biggest corporations in America. They weren't held back because of racism. No, people sometimes hold themselves back because they want to use racism as an excuse.
Yeah, great. You know, just totally embolden and back up what conservatives and Republicans have been saying all along. You're just using it as an excuse. All those studies that show the racism, it doesn't matter because Herman Cain has a couple of corporate buddies that also did well by kissing up to their corporate bosses. Everything's fine. He says many of them don't have to deal with racism, but many of them do. Did you think about that? And the guys who were not as good as corporate suck-ups as you sometimes have trouble, right? Doesn't mean that you just say, okay, well then we can't get beyond it and we shouldn't work hard. Nobody's saying that. But what we're saying is there are some institutional problems and we should look to address them in smart ways and not even necessarily in any liberal or conservative or libertarian ways, but let's think through the problems and let's try to find an answer to those problems instead of ignoring them and just putting up Herman Cain, a token guy, to say, oh, no, it's okay, you're all absolved, all of society is absolved because I'm a black guy and I worked up the corporate ladder by being really great to my bosses. So, everything's going to be just fine. I didn't experience as much racism as some other people do, so just ignore the problem. And you know what? The problem is that's exactly the whole point of Herman Cain. That's why he's been put in this position by people like the Koch brothers who've been funding him all along, and that's why the Republican voters love him. And that's his whole purpose in this campaign. Keep it real.